This presentation, titled SQF Edition 9, comes to us from LeAnn Chuboff. LeAnn has more than 30 years of food service experience, specializing in supply chain food safety and quality assurance. She is currently the Vice President of Technical Affairs for the Safe Quality Food SQF Institute, responsible for the technical elements of the SQF program, including the development, maintenance, and technical support of the SQF code and supporting materials. Prior to working at the SQF Institute, LeAnn worked for the National Restaurant Association Solutions as the Director of Science and Regulatory Relations. In this role, she was responsible for the technical accuracy of the ServSafe food safety program and developed program and services on food safety and food defense to fit with all segments of the restaurant industry. LeAnn has also worked for Long John Silver's and Boston Market in corporate quality assurance, where she developed food safety and vendor approval programs. LeAnn is active with many organizations, including GFSI, AFDO, and the International Association for Food Protection. And with that, take it away, LeAnn.
All righty. Well, thank you, Mike. I appreciate the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to talk to you today about the food at the Food Safety Expo. My topic today is Edition 9, SQF Edition 9. Hopefully, if you're listening, or some of you have realized that SQF has released their new codes for Edition 9. But before I begin, I want to give you a little background about SQF, just real brief, because probably many of you already know. But SQF has a farm-to-fork solution. We are a benchmarked certified or benchmarked accredited certification program for food safety from farm to fork, as well as quality, having over about 10,000 certificates in 40 different countries. Our main countries being the United States and Canada, Mexico, Australia, and New Zealand, as well as Japan and China. So those are our main regions, but really our goal overall is a safe supply chain. We want to strengthen our partner relationships and expand our partner opportunities globally. Okay, so for today's presentation, I will be discussing the SQF code, the layout and design. Some of you have taken a quick peek at it, have recognized that the SQF code has changed a little bit. I'll go over the technical changes to Part A as well as Part B and the FAQs so far, and then also some implementation strategies that I thought might be helpful for you as you move from one edition to the next. So here is a quick snapshot over what is the differences between 8.1 and 9 as it relates to the code and the different food sector categories applicable to each code. So as you can see, the primary production in 8.1, which is on the left-hand side of your screen, is now into 3 different codes itself. So we broke up primary so that there's now an animal production, primary plant production, and aquaculture. So previously it was 1 system element, and now we have 3 different codes, 3 different system elements. And another aspect that you might see is that FSC4, which is pack houses, is now in primary plant production versus food manufacturing. It's a better fit. There are many growers and packers, even field packing, that is done, and that would fall under primary plant production. For the manufacturing codes, the codes in blue, we did have 1 code under edition 8.1, and now under edition 9, those are broken out into 5 different codes. Always had these food sector categories, but now they have their own system element, their own risks specific to that industry scope. So animal product manufacturing includes slaughter, meat production, and seafood production. And then food manufacturing, all those food sector categories, soup to nuts, dairy, bakeries, etc. That's under food manufacturing. But we did take out dietary supplements, FSC 31, pet food, FSC 32, and animal feed, FSC 34, and we put them into their own separate food sector categories. Pet food, for those of you that are manufacturing pet food, you'll note in this code that allergens is not a mandatory requirement anymore. So it's still mandatory under food manufacturing, but under pet food, it is not a mandatory requirement, but it's risk-based. Storage and distribution and food packaging, not much changes within those food sector categories. And the quality code really didn't change much. It aligns more with the food manufacturing code, but the terminology, the language, everything really didn't change so much, but we did address the wording in the code so that we can expand the application of the quality code. And now it applies to any GFSI recognized standard, not just SQF. So any GFSI recognized standard can use the quality code. So we changed the wording in the quality code so that it's not SQF food safety system reference, but it's just the food safety system reference that's in the quality code. So that again can be applied to any other GFSI benchmark standard along with SQF. We still have our food retail and our food service codes and our fundamental code, but those did not get upgraded or with edition 9. They didn't have those changes in edition 9. So they're still under that relevant edition 8.1 for the food retail, food service codes, and then 1.1 for fundamentals. We are looking to update those codes. However, that's just down the line within 2021. So here's the new code covers. So the code covers are color coded, as you notice. So color coded. So the blue is the manufacturing codes and the relevant food sector categories. Yellow is the primary plant production, and then the food safety codes, manufacturing of food packaging and storage and distribution, and then the quality codes, the purple code. So you can see new look to the code with their own relevant industry icon associated with that code. And as you'll see right in the middle there, the implementation date, May 24th, 2021 of this year. We also have new look in the inside of the code itself. We redesigned the inside of the code, removed the academic look to the code, provided more white space, a larger font, color-coded sections. It's easier for the practitioner or the user of the code to look through the code and find the specific sections they're looking for. So part A, which is the code methodology, and then part B got all the new looks to the tables and everything. So definitely new layout and design. So now I want to get into the technical changes of the SQF code. We'll start with part A first. So part A, I referenced it earlier, is the code methodology. This is where the scoring, suspensions and withdrawals, audit duration, how to get started. So that is what's contained in part A. Oftentimes we really don't pay a lot of attention to it because it's mostly the certification bodies that really look to see what these changes are and how they impact the site. But they're very relevant to the site, and so it's always good to take a look at this. So I want to tell you some of the changes that we had. There weren't a lot of changes. When you leaf through it, you'll see that the layout has changed, the numbering has changed, the sections have changed, but really the content hasn't changed except for these key parts. So the first change is in the scoring. We moved scoring from 10 points for a major nonconformance to 5 points deduction for a major nonconformance. So if you're familiar with SQF, you'll recognize majors and minors and the differences between the two. And when we do a data analysis of our scoring, what we recognized is that there really was such a discrepancy between the number of minors and majors that perhaps auditors weren't issuing majors due to the number of points that were deducted, that were required to be deducted of it. And it was a little intimidating. So we looked at that and we thought, well, what if we reduce the number of majors? Because reduce the number of points for majors, because the report reviews themselves, you could see that there was some system elements breakdowns. A major is when there's a systematic breakdown to a system element. So HACCP programs or your GMPs, sanitation, allergens, training, management commitment, those are all those fundamentals, those system element breakdowns, or those system elements. And when there's a group of non-conformances associated to one system element, it should be grouped as a major. It then allows the site, and it provides the site with a bigger picture to say, I need to do a root cause on this system element versus just this one nonconformance. And also we had like, a bunch of nonconformances. We had some sites that were receiving 30 minor nonconformance when really it could have been grouped into 2 majors and a couple of minor nonconformances. So we looked to see the scoring and we changed it from 10 points to a 5-point deduction. And we'll keep track of this as it goes, as the code is released. We'll keep track of the scoring and continuously provide everybody updates in that change of scoring that we have. The second change that we had is with unannounced audits, and this is a GFSI change. So GFSI, we have to follow those benchmarking requirements that GFSI puts forth. And unannounced audits, our SQF users will be very familiar with this. So this isn't a big change, but the cycle is different. So we used to do it at 1 in every 3 certification cycles. So one in every 3 years, is one cycle, one every 3 certification cycles. So once those 3 years were up, then you had a new, it reset. Well, now it's 1 in every 3 years. So once you have an unannounced audit, it resets with that unannounced audit. So year 1 is an unannounced audit, 2 and 3 are none, and then year 4 is an unannounced audit. So you have to, it resets with that year instead of the site certification cycle. The other one, the third change that we did in Part A is we removed the requirements for desk audits for initial certifications only. So if you're a new site under 8.1, an initial certification would require a desk or a stage 1 review. And then the second stage would be the on-site audit. But we removed that requirement. Now, as a site, you can still volunteer and pay for a desk audit, but it wouldn't be scored and it wouldn't be a part of the certification audit, and you'd have to have that all audited again at the site audit. But we did remove that requirement. The third change that we made is for the certification bodies as well as the sites themselves, but we removed the audit duration table, and now we reference the specific duration for audits that GFSI has spelled out. So it's 2 days for manufacturing, a day for food storage and distribution, food packaging, a half day for most primary scopes. So we removed the duration table, put in factors that would impact the duration of the audit, but we eliminated that audit duration table. It could still be used as a guide, but it's not in the code anymore. And then the fourth change that, or 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth change actually, the fifth change that we made is we included options for remote audits. So not fully remote. So the audit still has to have 2 parts. If parts are done remotely, there still has to be an on-site component. So the fully remote audits are not GFSI benchmarked. It's an option, but it's not benchmarked. So within the code itself, we included requirements for that partial remote or a hybrid remote audit and how that can be conducted by the CB and how the site can prepare for it. And then lastly, what we did is we clarified activities for when a site is suspended or fails an audit. So before it was quite confusing for sites so that they didn't know what was the consequence for a failed audit or a suspended or even a withdrawn audit. So what we did is we created an if-then table. And side note for your training programs, if-then tables are a great way of sharing when there's an action and what the result of that action would lead to. So if the site does not permit the recertification or the surveillance audit to occur, then the certification body does this. It's a great tool, like for crisis management plans, for example. If we have no power, then we do this. So just as a side note, it's something you might want to consider in your own plans themselves, but it's a really handy tool to use. All right, so let's get to the technical changes, or Part B of the SQF code. And these are my top 9s for Edition 9. These are not anything that I think are my favorite or any David Letterman list or anything like that. These are just my top 9 for edition 9, and it's based off of public comments that we've received or based off of frequently asked questions that we hear about. So I just want to share these top 9s for edition 9, and these are based off of the technical changes or those auditable requirements in Part B. So the first change is the addition of foods, or the first technical change that I've identified is the addition of food safety culture in 2 areas within the SQF code, the policy statement and within its own requirements. So the policy statement within 2.1.1.1, as well as within its own requirement within 2.1.1.2. And so within its own, right, within its, so the policy statement within 2.1.1.1, and that's a requirement that the policy statement shall have the review of food safety culture, and then again within its own requirement in 2.1.1.2, and that's a series of requirements that the site should demonstrate in order to ensure that they have food safety culture at that site. And that's what the auditor would be looking at. That's the auditable part. There is one other component, 2.1.1.3, and that's within the organizational chart. And there was one little change within that organizational chart. And that organizational chart states that the relationships between the reporting structure shall ensure that food safety can occur. So that was one added change as well. And then number 2 is the clarified oversight of contract manufacturers for high and low risk. So contract manufacturers is under 2.3.3. And what we did within contract manufacturers is that we've identified what the site needs to do to ensure their co-mans are abiding to the SQF code. So keep in mind, I would also reference the SQF glossary that defines co-manufacturers and what's a contract manufacturer. So a contract manufacturer is making or product on behalf of that site or some stage of the process on behalf of that site, and that site is achieving SQF certification. So those co-mans need to ensure that they're following the right food safety requirements in order to represent that SQF certificate. So what we did is define sites into high risk and low risk. And the high risk sites do require that there's some type of verification either by the site itself or a third party that the co-man is abiding to the SQF code requirements. Low risk is now defined, and it can still do by an on-site audit by the certified site of that co-man, or it can be verified through another GFSI standard. And we also added within co-mans the ability to, or the requirement that any contracted third-party storage and distribution centers need to be included in this requirement. Number 3, we added a new requirement for product changeovers and label reconciliation, and this is under product identification under 2.6.1. So new requirements for product changeovers and label reconciliation. And this is requiring, sorry, I want to get my book out. So this is requiring that sites have a procedure in place that evaluates the label process and reconciling the labels. So during product changeovers or startup or at the end, it doesn't have to be after every single run, but there needs to be a policy and a procedure in place to ensure that the site has methodology so that the right product is in the right package. So the number one recall that we see is mislabeling of allergens, and that's because the wrong product is mislabeled. The wrong product is in the wrong package. And what this requirement will do will try and reduce those number of recalls, because there needs to be there needs to be a policy in place for label reconciliation. The fourth change is internal testing and sampling requirements, and this is under 2.4.4.2. So 2.4.4.2, we always had a requirement for external labs as well as internal labs. External labs, when you're using an external lab, they have to meet the requirements of ISO 17025 or equivalent standard. Now for internal laboratory and internal product testing, those methodologies that are used for that still also have to meet the specific requirements in 17025. Doesn't mean that your internal lab has to be accredited to 17025. In fact, many of the code requirements already cover 17025, but it's a requirement out of GFSI, and it's just basic good laboratory practices. It's the proficiency testing that you're already familiar with. It's the training procedures that you have in place, and it's the policies and the procedures and the methodology that you follow for this testing. It applies to only food safety test, not to quality test or any daily checks unless it's a food safety test, and that's what it would apply to. Number 5 is additional training requirements as it pertains to testing and sampling. And that's just what I was referring to. So going to 2.9.2.1, 2.9.2.1 identifies the training that's required by the site. And we added a requirement for testing that staff, applicable staff, has to be trained if they're doing the testing and the sampling. So again, that was part of the 17025, and that's how we embedded those requirements within the code itself. Number 6 is additional requirements for adequate ventilation. So for this requirement, we always had a requirement for ventilation, but it was only applied if you were cooking and you had cooking vessels and vent hoods. So we pulled this out as its standalone requirement now, and it's required to have adequate ventilation and positive airflow when applicable. So need to, this is especially important for in production areas or the packaging areas, the finished packaging areas. So there's no opportunity for airborne contamination. And that leads us into number 7, which is ambient air testing. Ambient air testing is under 11.7.1.2, and that is required for high processes. So if there's a process that's high risk, ready to eat foods, for example, would be high risk, there would have to be an annual ambient air testing. So you would be, this is risk-based, you would identify which are those risks that would be carried airborne as it applies to your product, and then the appropriate test. So we're not stating that you should do pathogen testing or, but more indicator organisms or those that would apply to the risk that you identified. And then number 8 is we looked at storage and distribution and the feed standards, and we had, based off of the requirements in GFSI, they allow, they are calling for a food safety risk management system. So not specific to Codex HACCP. So we took this opportunity to include the preventive controls and an opportunity for those in those storage and distribution and feed sites in the United States. We follow FDA guidelines that use under the FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, and the preventative controls for human food. And so we were able to incorporate the preventive controls. So you can have CCPs or PCs, preventive controls within your food safety plan. And lastly, number 9 is the additional requirement for water testing and produce standards. So that is under irrigation water. And what we did is we evaluated the recent outbreaks and the recent recalls for romaine lettuce and leafy greens, looked at the sources of that as it came to the irrigation source, and they call them CAFOs, which is concentrated animal feeding operations, and the treatment of water and the handling of water in those areas. So those were my top 9. Of course, there are bunch of other changes that are out there in Edition 9, but these are my top that I had for the Edition 9 code. So just something for you to think about. And this is usually a live chat, but something for you to think about as you prepare to implement Edition 9. Number one is, have you reviewed the key changes to SQF Edition 9 as it relates to your area? If not, what's your plan to do that? So make a plan to do that and understand how you need to prepare. You could go to our website and identify those changes and start your plan. And then look to see, ask yourself, what is that biggest impact to food safety? So what's your biggest impact to food safety as it relates to these changes? What do you think the biggest challenge will be for your site? Maybe you need to do additional training. Maybe you'll need to put in an extra person or whatever. One of the changes that we have that I didn't talk about previously is the backup SQF practitioner. So that's now identified in the code. Who will that be? So maybe that might be the biggest challenge that you have. And then what do you think will be the biggest challenge for the auditor? It's good to think that way. If you're not the auditor, if you're the site, it's also good to think that way so that you could prepare and how you demonstrate how you meet those requirements to the SQF code. So here's a list of FAQs we've received so far. The first one is, when will the checklist and guidance documents be posted? So our checklist and the code changes and the numbering changes have been posted to sqfi.com, and you could find them there. The guidance documents, we're working on those. They should be posted. Manufacturing will be our first one posted, hopefully by March 1st. Second is, how will the CBs calculate the audit duration without the table? So that table was always used by the CBs as that guide to calculate audit duration. GFSI put minimum duration times in there, so we defaulted to GFSI. The CBs can still use that as a guide if that's helpful. They'll have to look at the previous audit history. We don't expect that anything should change with your existing duration. We're just saying that we wanted the CBs to follow what GFSI has stated. So the guide can still be used. That table can still be used. I believe it was from an ISO 22003. So you can still use that. CBs can still use that. How will previous unannounced audits fit into the change in the unannounced audit requirement? Well, right now it's kind of up in the air. As you know, unannounced audits have been waived during the pandemic. We don't know how that will be moving forward on May 24th, if we'll continue. Right now, it's the waiver is until May 24th with the new edition. So we've got to take a look and see how many sites have missed audits, unannounced audits last year. Our hope was just to continue and resume. Your last unannounced audit would be your number one, and then 3 years later, another one, so on and so forth. But we're not quite sure how that will fit. So we might just reset everybody. We just haven't figured that out just yet. So more to come on that. Will the implementation date be postponed due to COVID? Not likely. I will say never, but I don't foresee the postponement of the release of Edition 9. How will the new numbering affect my policy and procedures? So there is an Excel document. So it's a very handy document that identifies Edition 8.1 versus Edition 9 and where the numbering is. So you can easily find where those numbering changes are. I would say that you could use that as your guide if you want to change policies and procedures. It's not in the code that you have to have your policies and procedures numbered correctly to the SQF edition. It's your food safety management system. You number it and implement policies and procedures as you fit. So you can renumber them or not. The code does say that you have to be familiar with the edition, the current edition that you're being audited against. And as long as you can demonstrate that to the auditor, it's up to you whether you want to renumber it or not. How will food safety culture be interpreted by the auditor? That's a good one. I think 2.1.1.2 identifies a really good list. It talks about empowerment, employee empowerment to make food safety decisions. It talks about the management responsibility and the competencies and the resources that are dedicated to the food safety program. And if the site can demonstrate that, the information and the communication of how food safety practices and the importance of food safety, how that is being shared with the employees. That's what the site needs to demonstrate. So it is very subjective, I would agree. We do plan on having more webinars and guidance documents for the site and the auditor, so that it'll be easier to interpret food safety culture and how to demonstrate that, because auditors look, some auditors are black and white, but food safety culture sometimes is hard to identify. But I think that sites that have good food safety culture, they'll be able to demonstrate that. Next question is, what tests would fall under the new requirements for internal sampling and testing? Again, only food safety tests. So quick tip, what I would do is I would make a list of all the tests that you do at your site. So make a list, whether it's food safety or food quality, a daily check, pre-op checks, any of those checks that you do, make a list. Is it for food safety? Yes or no? If it is, then you identify that. And then moving forward, then what would be your methodology? So if it's a pH, because you're using acidity to control a pathogen, if it's finished product testing for indicator organisms, or even for your pathogen testing, what's the methodology and what do you do if it's internal or external? And then you would be able to identify and narrow down that list. And then those are the tests that are applicable. So you look at the methodology, you look at the training methods on who is conducting those tests, you make sure that you do proficiency testings on those tests, and have the right reporting and record keeping for all the results from those tests. So that's how I would start, but really those tests are only applicable for food safety test as it applies to that product. Will SQF continue to be recognized by GFSI with the implementation of Edition 9? Yes, we will. We started the benchmarking process, so we submitted our application. We're on the pathway to getting benchmarked. So GFSI recognizes those certification programs that are part of the benchmarking process. So implementation was published last year, October 23rd. Audits will start May 24th. No desk audit. Remember, initial certifications do not have a desk audit component. And if you're under a surveillance audit right now, you will be audited under Edition 8.1. If you are under a surveillance audit, once Edition 9 kicks in, then it would be under Edition 9. So the surveillance audit will be conducted to the code that the site was certified against. So just to wrap things up, real quick, some implementation best practices. The questions that we asked earlier, really just ask yourself, how can I start? How can I best prepare myself? Maybe you've read the code, maybe you've looked at the code changes, but now what do I do? So the first thing is do a gap analysis. Use the code change tool or the numbering tool or the current checklist that we have posted to Edition 9 and do a gap assessment. Identify those changes that are in the SQF code and how are you adhering to those changes. So include this maybe as part of your internal audit to the new Edition 9 checklist. Use the corrective action register and roadmap to guide changes necessary for compliance. So make sure that whatever changes you've identified, whether you're in or out of compliance, what are those, what do you need to do in order to make those changes? And you don't have to do it all at one time. You eat an elephant, seems pretty daunting, but one little bite at a time. That's how you need to address it. Do that internal audit to verify those compliance of those completed changes. Make sure your practitioner meetings are documented with management on a standardized agenda with meeting minutes that will demonstrate how you evaluated 8.1 to Edition 9 and how you prepared to change over to Edition 9. And make sure that you engage top management as well as the practitioners down to the backup practitioner and even the frontline employees, especially CCP operators. Engage the entire operation as you move forward with Edition 9. If you're the SQF practitioner, it's not all your responsibility. Make sure you include all of the right management, all of the right people involved so that you get support from the top down and the bottom up as well. You can always use a third party. You can use a consultant. You could use do a pre-assessment to Edition 9. Some of the CBs right now, if you're under Edition 8.1 and your audit is before May 24th and it'll be to Edition 8.1, maybe you could ask your auditor to do it to Edition 9 and have your score to 8.1, but that might give you some readiness to give you some awareness of how ready you are to Edition 9. And then celebrate your success, even if they're little pieces here and there. But after each one, if you trained your backup practitioner, celebrate success. Make sure that you reward those employees and recognize those employees that helped you through your journey. And just a reminder, those audits will be implemented in May, so be fully prepared before them. So some key takeaways to wrap things up. First one, don't wait. Start the process now. Take the time just to read the changes or do a quick internal audit or gap assessment. Understand where you are and what you need to do in order to ramp up to Edition 9. And then seek advice, ask questions, focus on the intent of the code requirement and not so much the verbatim of that language. So it's easy to get wrapped up in the language, but focus on the intent of the code requirement. Why do I have to have a backup practitioner? Well, I'm not here. That's why they're going to be that backup practitioner. So that might help you identify who that person should be and what their training requirements would be as well. And then lastly, use the tools and resources available and don't be afraid to ask for help. So SQFI.com has all the checklists and code change as well as the numbering changes. So use that as your guides and don't be afraid to ask for help. So if you need more information, visit SQFI.com. We have our webinars on our YouTube channel. So go to our YouTube channel. Our code change document is there. Guidance documents will be coming soon. But SQFI.com under the resource tab, you could just drop down there and it'll have guidance documents and checklists. So click on there, or even Edition 9 webinars are posted right there. And with that, I want to thank you for your time and attention today with the Edition 9 changes. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. info@sqfi.com is your best bet. It goes right into a general inbox and it will be directed to the right person. Or you can always just give us a phone call. This is our US number that's posted on the screen. And with that, again, I want to thank you. Invite Mike back up onto the screen. So thanks again. Hope everybody has a great day.
Well, thank you, LeAnn Chuboff, for that look at SQF Edition 9. And that concludes this presentation.